Good day, welcome in the session exploring the real value of personal data sharing, big data of many, exploited by few, or not anymore. So as you guess, we are going to talk about personal data in this session. And we will talk about modern personal data management platforms, personal data sharing platforms, about value of personal data and how this data can be transformed or distributed in a fair way between all participants, and not just big companies, but also individuals, which actually were owners of their own data. So we will have very interesting presentations from several speakers, and at the end we will have a panel discussion. Let me share my screen. Hopefully Zoom application doesn't crash. Like it happened recently. Okay. So today we have 6 speakers and 2 panelists which will join us later. So the speakers are, first of all, is me. I will be a second speaker actually in the row. I'm Yuri Glickman. I'm a researcher at Fraunhofer Focus. Our first speaker will be Malte Bayer-Katzenberger, a team leader of data policy innovation from the European Commission. Ellen Blankertz, project director data economy from Stiftung Neue Verantwortung in Germany. Sean Topham, leader of the initiative Citizen Control of Personal Data in Smart Cities Marketplace from company Ascension, and also the leader of demonstrators activity in the DataVaults project. My co-host and technical coordinator of the DataVaults project, Sotirios Kousouris, who is a managing director of Youth5 company, and Ivan Martinez Rodriguez, a big data architect from Atos, Spain, in Madrid. And later, 2 colleagues will join us. First of all is George Priester, president of Major Cities of Europe, and Marido Dabamida, head of ethics and legal issues department at ETA, and a legal expert, and also legal expert in DataVaults project, which is organizing this session. So I will not spend too much words on introducing the topic. You know the importance of personal data and the potential value hidden in personal data. And but we all know what there are many issues related to it, and quite negative press, which we usually get in media, and some terrible scandals which happen on a regular basis, which make difficult to engage people to share their personal data. And of course, these scandals are happening not without a reason. So work with personal data requires a lot of efforts and a lot of attention to different details. But there are many benefits for all participants, and personal potential benefits which can be opened with help of personal data. And in this session, we want to talk about that, talk about platforms, talk about issues, talk about what needs to be done and what is actually it's happening at the moment. And our first speaker will be Malte Bayer-Katzenberger from the European Commission. Malte, I give you a word. Please activate your camera.
Yes, good morning, Yuri. Good morning, colleagues. I hope everything works fine technically and you can hear me well. I'm very happy. Thank you to the Big Data Value Association. Thank you to Yuri for inviting me to this session. I'm very excited because the topic of the personal data vaults, of the personal data spaces is fascinating me quite a lot. And I can maybe say as introduction, my first touch point on finding a novel kind of way to organize the use of personal data in the economy dates back to a reading I made in 2014, Big Data, Big Privacy, Anne Cavoukian and Drummond Reed, then the founder of the Respect Network and still around in the self-sovereign identity world, where writing about the vision that we all dispose of our personal data clouds, each of us have a cloud, and the dominant use of data about us would be a subscription from our personal data vaults. So away from the idea that only big platforms can put data to work, as we sometimes hear in the economy, and that we come to a much more respectful use of data use on demand, not just hoarding copies of data that you may actually never need. And that would bring us to what some call the human-centric data economy. Now, obviously, since 2013-14, this dream is not really fully coming true, but we know that a number of startups, and including also projects that the European Commission finances, is bringing this to a dream. So I'm speaking to you from a service in the European Commission that tries to promote data-driven innovation. We're the main interlocutor of the Big Data Value Association. That makes me also specifically happy to be here today. And we're also funding research under the Horizon research and innovation programs. We are interlinking, obviously, with people in different other services of the Commission, with the data protection colleagues in another department, but also with loads of other colleagues, trying to bring innovation around data forward and trying to see what you can do on the basis of the existing legislation, be it personal data protection legislation, but also competition law and other regulation. And we most recently have also edited the writing of the European data strategy, which came out in February last year, and are now working on a number of horizontal legislative actions, not least the Data Governance Act, on which I will speak a little bit in this call, and then maybe further horizontal legislation that will facilitate data use in society in a way that is compliant with data protection specifically, but also competition law, and trying to leverage the potential of this resource, which is non-rival but excludable. So you can leverage on copies of data, but sometimes also you want to exclude it, and sometimes you have to overcome also exclusionary conduct that puts the data to work. Now, back to the dream, I still believe that we need an infrastructural approach to personal big data. And what problems would we like to solve that are relatively hard to solve today? I may have 3, maybe 4, however you want to distinguish them. I think the first one is that in a world that is kind of still very much focused on collecting consent, and that builds, as a GDPR builds on informed consent, but also on the right to withdraw consent, that you need to keep track a bit of what is happening with your consent, what you consented to. So the first thing is, to me, that we need to have consent dashboards that keep an overview of what I consented to. Otherwise, I cannot meaningfully exercise my right to withdraw. It's a bit like with the cold calling and the spam emails. You want to have an unsubscribe button somewhere. And if you realize that maybe your data were used for things that you changed your mind on, or that you actually didn't foresee, and now you want to withdraw consent. Consent managing would also help us to actually know better what to consent to. So before we consent to something, a consent manager could help us to identify the terms and conditions that we don't have to maybe read ourselves. So this goes a bit in the direction of the privacy icons discussion that is not really going very far, but giving me an intelligible way to understand what's going on, what will happen to my data without having to read all the fine print. And then maybe even if you want to stretch this a little further with technology, I can also be advised on an observation by an intelligent algorithm that observes how I actually practically consent, and then says, well, Malte, normally you would consent to this type of service or to that type of service, so I don't even have to think about much anymore, because the algorithm tells me, well, this is within the bandwidth of consent that you have given so far. Maybe it can warn me about something unusual. And with natural language processing, this is not really science fiction anymore. This could be practically put to work. Question is now, who will pay for such a service, and how would it come about? And we will get to that problem. Now, the second type of use, maybe is 2 different ones, is obviously about specific data items that we could call credentials or attributes. So specific information about me like capacity to drive a car, being old enough to drink, able to supervise children, having professional qualifications for this, for that we could currently still do a lot on paper. So as we turn digital, we need a way to kind of manage these credentials and attributes. Maybe we don't even need to have them in the very long term, but in the short term, as digitization is not pervasive to just any service, especially government services, I may want to have copies, digital copies of such attributes and credentials and store them somewhere. And then when I go to a rental car or I apply for a new job, I can just pull out an algorithm actually from the service can just query my data wallet and say, is this person qualified to drive? And is there a verified piece of information in the wallet? And then if yes or no, actually the date of taking the driving license is of no concern. The funny image on my old driver's license from 1993 is of no concern. And just we need to digitally communicate besides the efficiency gains, also a bit of privacy here. And then obviously with a bit more difficult data, has this person ever been convicted for sentences and stuff? Maybe also there, you don't need to give someone the full print of all your criminal records. Maybe sometimes it's sufficient to just tell you, have you been convicted for prison sentences over a year? Whatever the needs are, there's many constellations where for verified attributes also you want a privacy preserving way of sharing this. And beyond the verified credentials, you could also go a bit farther and say, well, also data points can be exploited. Larger data points could be exploited that could then inform decision making in this way or the other. Let's take a medical case. Sometimes people believe that you can read out from spending behavior or even from your Spotify playlist whether you are prone to come for depression or something. Early signals can apparently be sensed. And if we believe and if we have tested these algorithms to really be robust enough to make such suggestions, then maybe that could also be used in the future. Now, you already sense there's two levels. First, you need to have the data, and then you have a robust and tested algorithm. But without the data availability in the infrastructures to go for it, we will never get to these second level at all. So that's also why I think we need to work on this. And then controlled sharing of data may also support very innocent use cases. I mean, just think about your connected car of the future. How will you organize the data access towards an independent repair garage where a lot of data land with your car provider? Will that be a direct interaction? Could it go through a data vault? I mean, that depends now more on the volumes of the data that you want to share than on something else. And again, here, does the repair garage need to read everything, and how do we organize this data flow? Which brings me to the third point that we could solve much better today is then something which is really hard, I think, without the infrastructural component of personal data vaults, which is correlations and machine learning on data that are currently held by different organizations, which you may want to bring together in a data vault for correlations, because when together they can inform a certain decision, and for that you will need the infrastructure. Which again also maybe if this becomes possible helps again my second use case where you think about transferring all data or just some data, or maybe you only transfer the learnings or the analytics from the data vault. I hope you can also still hear me well. I see a post from you that something happened on his side. I will just keep on talking until someone interrupts me. So here, if you truly believe of algorithms coming to the data, if you want to make federated machine learning happen, also for individuals, I think we need this infrastructure of each of us having this personal data vaults and being able to receive algorithms to this. So this is maybe in a nutshell the types of problems that we could solve with this type of infrastructure. Now, why is it not really coming about? For first, it's not in anyone's specific individual interest as a commercial vendor to have this. So it depends on a lot of players to take this together, which makes it hard for one to invest into it. And then we have quite a bit of a startup space that is doing this, with also some limitations in the power to bring this to a wider network of people. So this is also why we see a lot of nice startups coming up in the My Data community, but we're not really seeing it happening at scale at the moment. Now, let me open a second front. So this is obviously a very individualistic view. of the thing. It's me and my data. I take decisions about my data. I want to maybe put this in the wider context of data use, which is sometimes not individualistic. Sometimes you are part of a group, or very often you are part of a group. And the data that you generate are either already relational data, it's about you and other people, or the data that you collect about yourself also inform people that are like you. And then your data use may also impact on others. So this has to be, so the discussion we have today has maybe to put in this wider context. And we certainly see the need for also collective forms of data rights, and we'll come to the discussions on data trusts and on data cooperatives, probably also with the discussion of Aline and other colleagues here on this session today. What did we do? And then maybe a last item that I should have mentioned among my list of problems to solve, which is the problem of individual decision making, cognitive capacity to take, and maybe also the question, do I need agents or at least advice that helps me to make informed decisions in the data economy, which is very much characterized by information asymmetry. Those who want your data, they know precisely what they can do with the data, what they also should not do with the data, and the potential what they will do with the data. You will barely oversee the risks and pitfalls for that. So the exchange still suffers from a very imbalanced situation. And here, if we had not only the infrastructure, but also the service behind the data spaces involved, we could also have individual data management advice services that tell you, well, careful, these people are known to do this as well. And they may, well, if you consent to this, they may forward your data to this other player, and then you will probably see this reaction. So we need these services in terms of redressing a bit also that agency and that information imbalance that you have. Now, how do we go about this at the Commission? I mean, we're funding great projects like DataVaults, which is featuring here today, and 2-3 others under the Horizon program. So we're testing out technology and see how it would work. But ultimately, I mean, this is a market problem that we need network effects, we need scale in this. So if only a handful of us have these data vaults, it will be useful in local communities or specific communities, but at scale, you will not achieve the maximum utility to this. So it's still a question how to actually bring this to a larger kind of audience. And we're not too skeptical about this, that also bigger players may get onto the train. But what we certainly want to achieve with also from a regulatory point of view, that we have a legal certainty how you would behave as a personal data vault, which already brings us a bit to the risk side of things. And the risk side of things is on 2 fronts. The risk side is on the individual level, that basically we have a wrong incentives being set. People will have it easier to share data with people that they maybe shouldn't have shared the data with because they don't oversee the consequences, or they just needed the money. And we have to come back on the problem how to also guide and maybe also protect individuals in a way that is not paternalistic, but also that takes account of the information imbalance that I just alluded to. But the second level risk is obviously a competition risk. I mean, if such data vaults become truly kind of useful and truly adopted, we could easily come also to a situation where the competition between providers of such service will very quickly consolidate, and we will see a trend towards a few players on this market. And if that would happen, this brings obvious problems in terms of, well, competition policy, and basically saying, well, this could be the next type of Facebook or the next type of big tech platform, whereas we would not like to see that, and that could bring basically the whole host of platform problems that we're now trying to solve with the Digital Markets Act a bit ex post. So here we come in with another signal to the market. It's called the Data Governance Act, and the Data Governance Act has a chapter on what we call the data intermediaries, and we're putting here the personal data vaults in a wider context of data intermediaries, including B2B platforms, ecosystem orchestration service, but also data cooperatives, which are the collective form of data management to which I alluded to already. to say here that we're coming in with a strict neutrality requirement, and that comes at several levels. The first one is that you have a neutrality towards the ecosystem. So it's like an app store. You have to be open to receive apps from a variety of sources and should be neutral into that. But you should also be the neutral agent, which in the case of the Parson DataVaults, we twisted a bit to being rather an agent of the individual and not entirely neutral, but you should certainly be having no own interest. That's the really important third dimension of the neutrality. You should have no own interest in the use of the data. You should really limit yourself to a role of a facilitator, and that's what you could also call an unbundling requirement ex ante from a competition law perspective. So the intermediary really is only the network provider that helps us to exchange data or to receive the algorithms into our personal data vault. But it should not be driven by own interest in the data use, which really then also works on the incentive dimension already to a certain extent, as I said. But indeed, the model will be, the business model will rely on transactions. It will rely on turnover. So there will always be a certain interest of these intermediaries also to make data flow, because that's when they probably will earn most of their money, unless people would go for a subscription model, which includes individuals, which is maybe a little less likely. So I'm seeing my time comes to the end. Let me just quickly then say, how do we avoid basically the ethical wrongful incentives? Here, I think our response would be we have to work then on maybe the prohibited cases. We have to work on data literacy, so people take informed decisions. But here, I'm less worried that with generations coming born digital, that this would work. But certainly, certain data use cases have to be excluded, which has always been a problem. To basically say, well, let's inhibit the data flows as much as we can. Let's stick to what we have today and not make more data flow. That seems to be a knee-jerk rejection, which I wouldn't support. But it's so that many useful cases would also suffer from such a overly prudent approach. So here, our response is that we have certainly to also then in legislation to say, well, this type of data cannot be used for this. We have to look at credit scoring models and other misaligned incentives. Maybe I'll leave it at that. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak here, and I'm now looking forward to the other presentations and the discussions. Thank you, Yuri, back to you.
Thank you, Malte. So I'm the next speaker. Now I will share my slides. Hopefully the system doesn't crash like it happened when I just started the session, which was a little surprise. Okay, maybe a few words about myself. I'm a researcher at Fraunhofer Focus in Berlin. I'm a deputy head of a department for digital public services, where we are supporting European and German public sector in IT modernization. And I'm leading a group which is a technical group and specialized on data platforms. And we are developing many data platforms. And one of our, let's say, prime projects, apart from DataVaults, which I'm going to present today, is a European data portal, or better to say, the new portal of the European Commission, which is called Data Europa EU, where we are the main developer. Which this portal was recently started, and it collects all European open data. So I recommend you to visit this interesting project online. And it's an official project of the European Commission to host all such data, or to collect, to make a catalog, not to host. Okay, but today I speak about DataVaults. DataVaults is a European project in which we are trying to give control back to data owners, or at least to make a step in this direction. And I think all who attend this session, they actually understand the value of a personal data. And of course, the key value behind, which is seen by many companies, it's to learn the customer. It's to better understand the customer expectations, customer needs, customer behavior. And it's, of course, a key source for offering personalized services. And the individuals typically it's a begin and at the end of personal data value chain. So on one side, they generate this data, and on the other side, they also receive the services which are a result of this data. They get this result directly or indirectly, but at the end, they are always targeted by the service production, basically. And we have at the moment more and more data. We have more and more devices, and there are a lot of users which are using modern smartphones, modern services, modern TVs. They all collect your data, and it's always a question. And according to the new regulations, thanks to them, at least we're asking you if you want to share this data or not, and you need to decide at some point if it makes sense or not. It's a question of awareness. So actually, many people are sharing their data without their required awareness, and they don't receive any value back in many cases, or sometimes this value is very small. So this is a kind of issue which we want to discuss also today in the session, and which we are trying to address a bit in our project. And the market is big, and we see the success of big companies, Facebook, Google, and others, which are getting, or actually have already more monopolist kind of position, which is an issue for development of a whole sector, I think. And there are many challenges on the way of using more personal data. First of all, of course, it's a matter of trust and also technical control over the data. So according to sociological studies, only 15% of people actually believe they have control on their data, but the reality could be even worse, because it's a question what kind of data you really control. And potentially each of us could control much more data, but don't have such a technical possibilities, first of all. And sometimes we would be maybe interested to get some data, but we don't have a suitable devices, so devices are not so far. Or maybe on our way around, we don't want whatever devices to collect data about us because we don't trust these devices. And of course, the main reason about that, the negative press, and not just negative press, but all scandals, what happened before. And indeed, there are a lot of dangers on this way when someone starts to collect your personal data. You should be very careful about what happens with them. And privacy and security, it's definitely an issue, and it's also a challenge which needs to be addressed. And but still, a younger generation of people are more and more interested in personalized services, and they have this where readiness to share data on their side is higher. But still, the awareness is very important. It should be awareness not only about benefits, but about risks as well. And education and awareness are, I think, are two very important topics in this domain. And I think at the moment it's done not enough about that, because many people will learn about personal data just from TV news or mass media. So I think it should become a more part of educational programs, not just in technical universities. And of course, regulations are very important, and we are glad what many governments and also European Commission are doing many steps in these directions. This is important, and in order to motivate people to share the data, they should get control. And at the same time, apart from control, the complexity of managing data should be somehow managed. So it should be not too much overhead, or not too difficult for individuals to share, to manage their data. Yeah, so what we want to do in the project is, first of all, let the data owners to decide themselves how much and which manner we would like to share data and for how long. And as Malte just mentioned, to change this decision if we decide so. This is important. Of course, we need to guarantee privacy and security. So privacy and security topics is a huge part in our project. And important in our part is how to motivate people to share their data. And we want to participate them or to provide a technical possibility and define such a business model where they get this participation. It's not only about money, but it could be different. But the question is how to monitor basically what is the value of what was generated out of data, and also how to distribute this value, which is also an important question. So the project itself started already 18 months ago, so we are now really in the middle of a project, and what we are doing now is we are developing the first prototype. It's a relatively big project where we have many partners, so 17 partners from 9 countries with 5 demonstrators, which we are building. And we have very, let's say, balanced consortium where we have data providers, we have scientific organizations, we have an industry, and we have public administrations as well. So this combination is very good for such kind of complex project. And our main vision is to develop a platform which would be secure and provide trusted and privacy-preserving mechanism to individuals, so they could take ownership and control of their data and share them at will, when they want, with whom they want, and for how long they want. So they to give them possibility, first of all, to manage data which they don't manage now, on one side, and on another side also to take this decision, and also to see, for example, information about these consents which we have been given, and also if we want to review it, as Malte mentioned. So this will be one of the functionalities which we will provide. So as a target users, we are targeting individuals, data providers, data seekers, and data analysts. And we, as many similar projects, we also have kind of multi-tier ecosystem governed by smart contracts to safeguard their ownership, privacy, and usage. So where technology blockchain plays a very important role in our project. And we are trying to attribute a value to all entities which are involved in generating of value out of data, especially data owners which are sharing their data. And we are trying to cover their quite a huge data workflow, starting from extraction of personal data from devices, from sensors, from technologies, or from somewhere, collecting, and also harmonizing the data, encrypting, providing access, storing, sharing, and of course we use it and share the data, and organizations can come, can search for data, can request data, need always explain for which purpose they need the data, how they want to use it. And of course, the data which is shared, not necessarily shared as a personal data, but get anonymized, maybe based on personas, or depending from the need of also organization. Individuals can have different possibilities to share data in different mode, like as really anonymized or pseudonymized or raw data in some cases. So, and we are trying to cover full cycle and also include even some analysis on the side of data users, so of data producers, basically individuals. So they don't share their raw data, but just show certain results of the analysis and don't disclose personal data at all. We have 5 demonstrators in the project, which are very different. One of our members in the consortium is Olympiacos Sport Club. For sure, you know it from different arts of sport, but it's a big organization where you have not just professionals, kind of football players or basketball players and so on, but you have also different fans, big fans community, and this pilot is so demonstrator is dedicated to providing better services to the whole community. And our demonstrator is from a public sector. It's from City Piraeus in Greece. It's about supporting the local entrepreneurship and mobility in the city. We have one e-health demonstrator from company Endemant 7, which has an innovative app enabling individuals to control their clinical records and share these own clinical records, basically with their doctors. If they were changing from one doctor to another or need consultation from another doctor, this app gives the possibility to share the data. And in our project, it will help also when we'll be able to share the data with certain scientific studies and so on. We'll provide additional possibilities to that app. We have a smart energy demonstrator with company Myvenergia in Spain. And the last demonstrator also from public sector is from Prato, City Prato in Italy. It's about improving municipal services with thanks to personal data and supporting also local tourism and tourism industry in the area. So as you can see, personal data can be used for very different applications, and we hope that our project will make a significant contribution for all these demonstrators and partners involved. Thank you. So now we go to our next speaker. Is Alina. Alina?
Yes. Thank you. So I just take over and we'll start sharing my screen. Hoping it works. So, yes, here we are. So thanks a lot for inviting me, and I hope, well, we both, Yuri and Malte, have already touched on certain topics that I will be picking up, and I hope this will make for a fruitful discussion at the end. What I want to explore in my presentation is the common good. What does that actually mean in relation to data and personal data? How can we drive it? And then kind of what can we learn in terms of for legal implications as well as technical implications. So let's just get started. The common good, Malte already mentioned, data has a certain collective dimension. Data is never really fully individual, but it also affects others as well. So to think about the common good, I generally find it very fruitful to think about, to keep it fairly broad to start with. So there you can think of both the individual benefits, which can mean basically what do I get from the data being collected and used. For example, a good user experience or very helpful recommendations for music or whatever content. There can also be collective benefits that go above and beyond what an individual gets. So what does society get? Is there new kind of innovation, new products, new research insights that can be generated from data, and that maybe data about me is used to generate, but I might not directly benefit from those insights being obtained. And I'm kind of neglecting here potential trade-offs between individual benefits and collective benefits, which I think are kind of more of a second order problem, but obviously they would have to be addressed kind of if you were to provide a full solution. But well, it's no secret that a big challenge comes from actually getting individuals to coordinate and getting some kind of collective action such that we can go beyond having small kind of person by person data sets, but get to what we generally refer to as big data. And I think it's here where personal data stores can be really interesting, but more as a kind of as a building block, and not necessarily as kind of the final objective. Because I think kind of there, it would be really helpful to also get this collective dimension incorporated. And there are various concepts that are being discussed in that context at the moment. So people are talking about data cooperatives, data trusts, data unions, which are kind of all flavors of a similar idea of basically getting people together to manage data rather than each and every individual doing it on their own. But what is clear at the same time is that privacy is not negotiable, but that it's kind of every provider has to offer that in order to make a solution well, feasible, desirable from a societal point of view. So what does that mean then? Kind of how do we drive the common good created from personal data? And here the value from data comes in various different forms. At the abstract level, it's always about information. And that can help you to do different things. It can help us to save money, for example, find the cheapest merchant, kind of get more transparency about a market, for example, by using comparison services or communication services. And it can also enable new research. And certainly the current crisis has shown how important it is to really link scientific insights and political decision-making. So that it's been really obvious that data is important to make good decisions also collectively. And then one discourse that's very prominent by some providers is that they kind of the idea is, okay, so individuals should get a share of the value that's created from data about them. And that's actually a pretty tricky one. And for at least 3 reasons. One, it's just not much what you get. So if you break it down, kind of how much Facebook makes in total from advertising per person per day, you wouldn't really get that very much. It's only a lot of value to Facebook because of the scale it has. We don't want people to think about privacy in terms of, well, do I have to actually, or am I being paid to give up my privacy as a fundamental right? So you still want certain safeguards in place. And data about different people may not always be worth the same amount. And it's very, very conceivable that richer people might be able to get more, extract more value from their data. And that's also very, very complicated and possibly not something we want. So at the same time, money can help basically as an allocation mechanism to, help people make a decision about, for example, do I prefer to pay for a certain service and not get any ads? And so I don't give any data away. But at the same time, it shouldn't be front and center, especially when it comes to empowering people to make more informed decisions about how data is used. And that's why I think it's important to think about value in different terms, not pure monetary terms. I think the Data Governance Act does actually a very good job at finding a way to identify projects or kind of ways of creating common good with data. And they have a whole section dedicated to data altruism, which means Malte didn't go into much detail yet, so I hope it's okay if I briefly summarize that. Basically, it means, or it has somewhat lower requirements for organizations, non-profit organizations that want to use data that users give to them without any monetary exchange. And that is a good way of identifying where people that give their data actually expect common good to be created, because they decide to support it with their data and just are kind of happy to see the final result that's being told what the data is, will be used for. At the same time, thinking about regulation more broadly, one can criticize that the current criteria to define data altruism and then kind of what's still required of them to use the data could be too high. And that's where I want to get to the point on about regulation more broadly. So the hurdle for data altruism may be not as high as for other kinds of data intermediaries, but it still is pretty high. And there is a concern if regulation is so strict that certain types of innovation, certain types of models can no longer be implemented. And in the context, for example, of research we're doing right now, we've been talking to a platform that Tony Strugoloni, they make ethical chocolate in the Netherlands, and they have developed their platform to track cocoa all along the value chain to make sure it's completely slavery-free and adheres to high social standards. They are making that platform accessible to other chocolate producers as well, but then it already kind of, they're entering a gray zone where it's not clear if they're a data intermediary, then would they have to separate that platform from their main business? And if they had to, the extra cost might be something that's not actually in the best interest of society. So generally, the current regulation seems to be targeted at preventing abuse and not necessarily enabling beneficial data use, even though, of course, I appreciate that's hard. It's not only the DGA, but also the GDPR comes with certain problems, especially when thinking about personal data. Of course, the kind of data protection general is really important, and the GDPR has provided a really helpful kind of first stepping stone to get that implemented in practice. At the same time, it puts a lot of burden on the individual to actually cut through complexity and make decisions where, I mean, as Malte also pointed out, the information they have is really little. And you always said, like, we need more education. It's like, yes, but in the meantime, and how much education, like, do we want people, each and everyone to become a data expert? Possibly not. One idea that we find very interesting is delegation. So having certain agent that I can decide, I want that agent to, for example, provide consent on my behalf, and also decide what else my data might be, I would want it to be used for. There is an example of, in the Californian Consumer Protection Data Protection Act, where they can have authorized agents that act on behalf of the individual to enforce their data rights. For example, to tell companies not to sell their data and to tell companies to delete data about them. And there are not many legal restrictions on who can become an authorized agent, but it is kind of, it's developing in an interesting direction, and consumers are finding it helpful. If anything, what's becoming clear is that companies are not very forthcoming in making it easy, not even for those agents to enforce those rights. So forget about consumers having to follow up with companies multiple times to get their will to be enforced. And those kind of agents can also then be kind of part of a toolbox of collective instruments, where we want consumers to be able to articulate more kind of what kind of value, what do they want with data about them to be done. Facebook had some mechanism in place in their early days where consumers could vote on their terms and condition. It wasn't binding, unfortunately, but I mean, imagine that today. It could be very powerful. You could also have consumer focus groups, or involve those that are most likely to be adversely affected by a certain change. And if we have those additional safeguards in place, then we could think about relaxing some of the rules of the GDPR, such as that strict focus on the informed individual. And then at the technical level, the last bit, there is also a lot of things are happening, and some of that may also be feasible without regulatory intervention. Sure, many of you will have heard about privacy enhancing technologies, and they can also be thought of as a good way of bridging individual and collective interests. I won't go into all the details because we're already approaching the end of the session, but that's certainly where we are seeing lots of interesting developments, but they're not scalable yet, just as the personal data stores aren't either so far. But if you have good ways of making data, kind of cutting out the sensitive parts from data, we can think about making data more widely accessible. And then we wouldn't have to constrain it to academic research, for example, but could also include potentially commercial providers. Google is advocating federated learning quite widely, federated learning of cohorts. And all I just want to say is it always sounds like a good proposition, and it's certainly going in the right direction, but we also need to kind of go one level deeper and see, well, so basically the way it works is data is stored on the device, algorithms are sent there, and before that is even happening, kind of different people are grouped into cohorts. And it's really important still to understand that this building of cohorts isn't done in any way that enables discrimination. And we still want people to also say, well, I want that data to stay in my phone and no algorithm to come my way. So no tracking at all, maybe not even have the data on the phone, just don't have it nowhere. Well, so to briefly summarize, there is a wide, or it seems fairly widely recognized that the data economy currently isn't working in the best possible way for consumers. We can think of answers, and personal data stores are an important kind of way, an important stepping stone there. But money shouldn't be the entire answer. We should think about value more broadly. What can consumers get from data? Which kind of insights could matter to them? And we should allow for experimentation. On the regulatory and technical side, there is room for development, and it's important it's important to have a regulatory constraints in place so as not to have innovation that is bad for society, but we should really be quite confident that we're not regulating away anything that could be good. And we should focus then on the risks that we want to control with that regulation. And privacy enhancing technologies could be very helpful to also help bridge those collective and individual interests in the longer term. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Aline. So we are not finishing the session yet.
Of course.
So our next speaker is Sean Topham. Sean, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, please share your
Yes.
screen. We can see.
You see it?
Yes.
Good.
You can make it full screen if you like. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'm Sean Topham, and basically I'm part of the DataVaults team. I'm in charge of the demonstrations, but I'm also the initiative lead for the Citizen Control of Personal Data initiative, which is part of the Smart Cities Marketplace, the EU's more or less best practice sharing body. But my background for 10 years was as a politician. And I think I come at it, a lot of these things from that perspective. I was in charge of economic development, the environment, transport, but also IT, because at that time it was, you needed somebody to actually see what was going on at that time. So just going back to the marketplace, it was set up quite a few years ago to really identify best practice in smart cities and to share that. But when it was set up, it definitely was unique, because I believe it was the first initiative which actually connected 3 DGs, connect, mobility and energy at the time. So all the lighthouse projects were feeding into it, and currently it's been relaunched and other initiatives being amalgamated with it. It was the European Innovation Partnership on Smart Cities and Communities. But as its name suggests, as a marketplace, it's designed to bring investors and cities together, but also to form groups around supply and demand on different issues. And a simple example is on smart lamppost. It was argued that if a city wanted to buy a number of smart lampposts, would industry start providing them in the required scale? Whereas if you got a group of cities amalgamating demand, then supply would act in the same way. So that's the general background to where this initiative sits. Within the marketplace, there are different action clusters. We're in the citizen focus one, but there's others covering energy, mobility, the integrated infrastructures. We're very new. We only started in January. We've had a few workshops and a roadmap, etc. But to summarize what we're trying to do, we're helping to build the conditions and relationships whereby the citizen will be willing to share personal data with a city and with other actors in the data economy, be it for altruism or for strong financial gain. It's just building up that data lake is what we're interested in. I'm talking of smart cities, but kind of on a pragmatic way, you have to start somewhere and you have to deal with what is available. You can't just leap to deploying advanced technology in a vacuum. So what we're really interested in isn't so much the cities, but it's in the citizens who live in those cities. And consequently, we're also interested in the organisations which work with the smart communities on the regional, rural, small town scale. So in that way, we're looking at how do we interact eventually with all citizens. And so the structure really is, if you deal with cities, that's the way to get there. And again, you've got to start somewhere. Within the marketplace, there has been an initiative trying to persuade cities to take up urban data platforms. Well, they're taking shape, and many cities are looking at them. Many have already got them, but there are obstacles which I'll come to. So again, it's not the pushing of urban data platforms we're interested in, but adding citizens' data to those to give them a push to get them taken up. So the simple concept is, if we grow the personal data lake, it will enhance the potential to get these urban data platforms rolled out. And then that in turn would contribute to growing the local data economy, the local SMEs, giving access to data for them, which is valuable. So we're very much jack of all trades approach, that we don't have to have in-depth knowledge of all the aspects of what we're trying to do, just know where the support is, not to duplicate anything, but to access the people who do know on a range of topics. So what I find interesting in this aspect, the whole question of personal data and the change in the data economy, is usually, if I was in a pub, people would say, what are you doing? What are you working on? And I would always end by saying, you're not going to see this for years yet. It might be 5 years before you actually see what is coming out of this project. But One project working with Digitranscope, they produced a document on the governance of digitally transformed society. And an interesting observation in there was that everything is much more urgent. Everything is much more in your face. That with other reports they may have written, it may have taken a few years before they got adopted into regulation, etc. But in this field, they're almost having run to keep up with. And clearly there's more regulations and improvements on course. But it is that doesn't strike me as if there's going to be the same delay in deploying the results from all these projects we're working with. So instead of this demonstrate and then deploy and exploit in kind of stages, what I feel is that with these projects at the moment, there will be a ready audience for them in the 2 years' time if you prepare the ground conditions. So I think that's sort of the time scale, I think, is different to normal. But to do this, obviously, we've got to get rid of a lot of obstacles, and I'll come to those in due course. And when I'm saying we, obviously, there's DataVaults started this, but other sister projects, particularly Kraken, who are very similar to us, and Aurora, who are looking at rural areas, and Ruggedized, who are looking at the issues of sharing best practice, etc. So we've got a good collection at the moment, and we will continue to add to this as each workshop will widen it and bring in other well-established initiatives in this field, like my data, to learn from them, etc. But we need to get our direction sorted first. I won't cover what we're covering because DataVaults people already talk about data collection and governance and things. But we also need to build into what we're doing what we anticipate support coming from the next round of data spaces in the key sectors, some of which we're working in, the initiatives to drive the SMEs and to develop digital skills. So we need to be aware that that support will join us and build for that as well. We accept that it will come, and how can we use it in advance? So as I said, we have a few building blocks, and we're looking at urban data platforms as a focus. Well, on that they identified 4 areas, many areas, but these are 4 examples that what are needed are methods and tools to help multiple cities adopt to be able to set up the platforms for securing closed data. They were after very practical use cases and practical roadmaps, and the key ones, capture joint business cases so multiple cities can adopt, and obviously to address all the technical, your organizational, legal aspects, etc. So the basis of what we've been doing in the first few months, we can describe it in kind of 4 pillars, looking at what solutions are going to be available, and that is how we're bringing in the extra projects and initiatives to really build a shopping list which a city could be offered, identifying the most suitable cities to become early adopters and how to replicate. A key one, which we're just starting on, we'll come back to later, is to really come up with a financial model which would operate within a city. And then clearly, how do we fit in with everybody else, and how can we help them, and how can they help us? So this diagram just essentially summarizes that, the problems being identified, how we replicate it, the financial models, and then links wider. But within that, we're starting to set up small groups. As I said, we can't know everything ourselves. And so now we've got a legal privacy group, which will work with the people responsible, say in Kraken and DataVaults, covering the legal ethics side of it, working on models for how a city would be able to take up something and govern it, the technical group. We have a standards group, again, with an interest in, from a consumer point of view, if you're going to have these data dashboards, they've got to be accessible by citizens to understand them and have very simple interfaces. So So now jumping on to what really is crucial is we've constantly people talk about the size of the market, the trillions, and where the current destination all goes to American corporates, and the task being to redistribute this wealth within the European model. But the question has to be asked, where will the redistribution go? And if some of it is going to enable cities to develop the urban data platforms, and that in turn would encourage citizens to share their data with the city and with the city's data economy. So it's kind of tracking that data, tracking those finances. So, so basically, we will be contributing to any existing data sources by being able to add some of the highest value data to whatever people are doing to increase the pool of personal data. So it's that kind of adding to the value. So basically, it's that question, how do we identify all the values, and how do we come up with models of how we share it between the actors? It'd be ambitious to say equally at the moment, but you actually have to start somewhere. And if you have a model which is not exactly equal to start off with, it can be readdressed. And so I think a key thing is that if there is a recognition from this work that revenues will accrue to a city, it will answer the question of where's the money coming from for these platforms? How can we justify putting money into this rather than into social services? So just indicating that the revenue will be coming will create further activity in a virtuous cycle. And so we'd be able to provide things just as much for a rural community as for a megacity. But it comes back now to the question of how do you measure this value? And I'm no way an expert, but you get all the studies of people sell their data for 10p for this purpose, or how much a marketing organisation would pay for it. A UK government study tried to completely look at what the whole value of geospatial data would be to the UK. I think that was in 2018, but looked at all the uses of it, mobility, energy planning, and tried to put values on it all, and covered a variety of sectors, and came up with a gross value added figure, assuming that would be the case if all the geospatial data was made more widely available. But this could be said to be a weakness, that the difficulties of data valuation, that everyone's coming up with different ways, and because it's a new economic asset and there doesn't seem to be great consensus on how to measure it. But having said that, then it does put a vacuum where if you have a different way of looking at it from the point of view holistically from the value for the whole city, then it might be an interesting approach. But they really do agree, though, that it is difficult to measure it. And so basically the quote at the bottom from Open Data is telling, attempts to put a price tag on data have failed thus far, since analogies with either tangible oil or intangible assets, patents, IP, etc., break at the point where the mapping becomes less clear, and you'd expect that because it's a completely new area. So that safety, it's another one of our sister projects, and I'm hoping they will address the next meeting, our next workshop, and I'll give you the date later. But they did analyse the review. They reviewed all the literature and came up with different summaries, but we're looking at data in terms of context, its quality, its privacy, aggregation and reporting. But tying into what I'm talking about and looking at the value to a complete city as a whole, they stress that the feasible alternative of looking at impact-based narratives. And by that, it just means telling the story of what the data means to the city and to what the clear outcomes and context would be, and then working back from that. And it sounds simplistic, but it's a way of looking at things, and it could be no worse or no better than alternatives. But so it is to kind of look at a data narrative approach and look to see how the release of personal data into a city and the revenues with it would tell the story of data in the city and accept and basically make a nest for when we release personal data into it. So coming to the end now, Yuri talked about the database, the DataVaults demonstrations, and we do have them in all the key areas: mobility, economic development, and then in culture, sports, etc. And then there are other projects doing it much more sectorally around energy and health, and looking at transnational systems covering education and health, etc. And others focusing on the use of it for SMEs, etc. So really, if you were going to a city, you would already have quite a good shopping list of applications they could look to. So come to the conclusion that if we get rid of the identified obstacles and we have all these projects putting stuff on the table which will be of value, we have a better idea of where will the money come from, and having a cumulative effect of adding the data to all the ecosystems, different ecosystems, bits of ecosystems. It'll bring about better policy making, better services, better functioning market, and better sharing of the value created compared with how it is now. So we'd be helping develop the European model. And really, what you have to conclude is there's such great complexity involved in what we're doing. A government can't just go out and say, do it. The market hasn't got something it can put on the table saying, here, have this. And there is so much going on in the networks and ecosystems where we have to do our best to understand it, to come to a way of getting cities to take up the availability of personal data. So there's the Smart Cities Marketplace citizen control of personal data section has some information, but it's being rebuilt at the moment. So all of the information is on the front page of the DataVaults website. I said that we'll be having a third workshop and it will be trying to look at just closing the gap between the value of data and what cities are already doing. And so there'll be more details of that circulated in due course. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Our next speaker is Sotiris Kousouris, who is the technical manager for DataVaults project and the managing director of Suite5 company. Sotiris, the floor is yours.
I'm sharing my slides. I hope you can all see them. So hello from my side. I'm trying to open the camera as well. Okay. So I'm Sotiris. I work for the Suite5 Data Intelligence Solutions, which is an SME that is a technology provider for data-driven services in AI. And since long, personal data spaces has been fascinating us and me personally, as we believe that personal data, regardless whether we refer to big or small data, holds an enormous value in it. A value, though, which is not used as it should be by different entities. We heard Alina saying that the data economy of personal data is not always working in the best interest of the data owners, so of the individuals. And we have seen in many cases that this data is exploited or overexploited in ways that are not ethical, in ways that are not adhering to the consent forms signed. There are many things that have to do with security breaches and privacy incidents, and eventually the real value of the data is not flowing back, at least a percentage of it, to the rightful owners. So all this creates a situation where many people become skeptical and are highly reluctant on sharing data, which is something that creates actually a negative ground for data sharing and data trading. And we've seen that by trading and sharing, we are not talking only about monetary compensation, but those could be things gratis, for free, for the common good. While at the other side, there are many people that are actually, let's say, fed up with the different restrictions and the different decisions that they have to make in order to give consent and follow, the guidelines, which are turned by many enterprises into a very complex, solutions. And this means they give up, they just share everything for free because they just want the service. And actually they blow more hot air in this big balloon of mistrust. So in DataVaults, what we're trying to do is that we're trying actually to provide the necessary technology foundations for building a secure and privacy respective data sharing platform. And this is one of the core things that we should think of. So let me, just start with a very naive question. You see in this slide a bar, okay, something that many of us missed in this COVID, curfews. But imagine that you are in a bar. Would you leave your wallet unattended, on display on the bar? Okay, of course, I'm not expecting, a different answer that a no here. And this actually gives a very quick idea of when something is considered quite valuable and important to us, it's also something that we care about and should not be taken out of our hands that easy. And when we talk about personal data and security and privacy, we can actually say that this is more than just your wallet, because your wallet might include some money, might include some financial information like credit cards or whatever, but personal data is quite much more. It's your private life, it's your personal life, it's your health records, all those things that actually quantify an individual and actually are of high value. So we should be very careful, and we should be even more careful when this is actually real personal data. So not just some, quasi-identifiers or things that are, commonly found by just Googling, but real personal data, which is of value, which are able to distinguish, let's say, an individual from another. Of course, as we heard in the previous presentation also, there are various regulations and norms that point this out, and this importance in every country, in every state, everywhere. So we should be really careful of how we handle it. And of course, going away from just the security and privacy question, we should also have in mind trust. So why we need trust? So trust guarantees need to be there in any data sharing environment or data trading, name it as you like. So first, the individuals, so in our case, the data owners, the ones that are sharing the data, need to trust that the platform, if we are talking about sharing data over a platform or over an infrastructure or over an intermediary, needs to be trusted. And on the other side, the actual buyers of this data need to trust the platform that the data that is provided to them is actually of value and of true information. And the thing is that trust is built piece by piece, as we say here, but can be destroyed instantly and totally. So, they say that if the glass is broken, it cannot glue back. And this is actually something that is quite important for any infrastructure that is tasked to handle, process, and forward such value and enable different value flows over it. So sharing means value flow and gains, and we believe that it's high time for data owners to get compensated for their assets. This does not have to be, as we said, money and monetary compensation, but could be other ways of, providing back value to the rightful owners. And of course, it is fundamental to keep privacy and, as we said, security in place. So our approach in DataVaults is actually to build a platform that brings together the data owners and the data seekers. And part of this platform is accessible to those two main actors. So the approach, as we see it, is that on the left hand, we have the data owners that are providing information or are managing, first of all, their information prior to providing that to a platform over by using personalized applications. So imagine that you have, as we call it, a personal data vault that stores your data and actually gives you control over them. And on the other side, we have the so-called cloud-based platform, or you can think of it as a data marketplace, where the data that is shared is let's say forwarded, and data seekers can look at on it. So this is something, as we say, a double permissive ledger approach. So imagine, let's say, two blockchains running in parallel, where on the one side, on the left side, you have evidence of what is shared between a data owner and an intermediary, and on the other side, you have actually evidence and a ledger where you store which transactions are performed between such a platform and the prospective data seekers, without revealing the real identity of data owners in case this is chosen not to do so. So how does it work? As I described, from a technical perspective, we see that there are two different, let's say, infrastructures. On the one side, we have the personal data vault. You see some technologies here, which actually allows individuals to collect their data from different sources they choose, store the data there on their side, and gives them the option to select when they want to share something, what exactly they want to share. They want to share their own data, they want to send analytics of their data or whatever. How to share the data? Data can be shared in an anonymous manner. Data can be shared encrypted, or can be shared openly and be available to everybody. Dictate who can have access to this data, with whom to share, under which conditions, and so on. And all this is actually coupled by other technologies that are able to identify the risk exposure of an individual. So based on what you have shared and the, let's say, configuration, the sharing configuration of how your data is going to flow, then actually you can get some, in some dashboard, information about your risk exposure, not only based on what you are actually sharing, but also about what you have already shared over such a platform. Some AI behind it in order to identify that if you share, for example, personal information and financial information and some other stuff, then you are highly exposed to people that could actually learn more about your identity and your preferences and so on. And finally, there need to be also mechanisms to trust that the platform that you are providing the data is a platform that is, let's say, authenticated, that is actually not being impersonated by another entity, so could actually steal your data. And on the other side, the platform that is actually accepting this data needs to know that this data is coming from a trusted individual, so somebody who has signed up and who has actually not tackled with the internal system in order to flow the data, the platform with malicious data and data that is of no real value for the data seekers. On the other side, on the, as we call it, marketplace, or on the cloud-based data vault. So this is something like the, the store front page. We have an infrastructure that hosts the data in secure storage containers and allows to perform operations over this data, not by the intermediary, so not by the platform, but by the users of the platform, the data seekers, in secure spaces, so that the data is not flowing out. So this is actually one access point for all. What needs to be there is that access provision to the data needs to be quite simple, but always based on the selections made by the individuals. There should be encryption and decryption mechanisms that would actually allow the data to be handled as the individual wishes, and that the data is made available only to the ones that have, let's say, a contract. Data needs to be searchable, and actually data isolation plays a crucial role here. So the way to move on and the technologies we're using actually have to do with first letting individuals decide, as we said, what, how much, and in which manner they would like to share. So we talk about data asset control and management, about trusted and secure sharing methods, and risk exposure awareness. Then to guarantee that the privacy and the security of personal data is there during all the steps from the collection to the utilization. So technologies like TPMs and crypto, like blockchains, private or public ones, based attribute-based encryption and access controls are there, anonymization and so on. And finally, there should be tools which actually attribute to a fair share, which contribute to attributing a fair share of value of data from the data seekers back to the data owners, and actually that could also provide an added value over this data. So we talk about tools that support novel compensation schemes, blockchains for having smart contracts and trying to oversee transactions, and also analytics and intelligence generation that could create new value, which could be again fed into the platform for further, fetching and for further contracts by data seekers. So all of these technologies are things that we're trying to work on in our project in DataVaults. Of course, we have two big bets that we are seeing. The first one is to make the technology work, to allow for privacy, security, and trust to be there in such a platform. And the second is actually to allow technology and work with technology to make it easy for people to use, so individuals and data seekers as well. Because quoting Malte in the beginning, we need to have network effects. Otherwise, we are not going to have an audience, a crucial mass of audience that can drive such a platform forward and could actually provide the real content, which is actually the value over which such a platform works. So thank you very much, and Yuri, back to you.
Thank you, Sotiris. Our next speaker is Ivan Martinez Rodriguez from Atos. Ivan?
Yeah, Yuri, let me share my screen,
please.
Okay. Could you see my screen properly?
Yes, but it's not full screen at the moment.
Sorry. Yeah.
No.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. First of all, thanks, Yuri, for inviting me to this interesting session. Let me now continue. Let me now provide to all of you a general overview of the BodyPass project approach, trying to emphasize on the personal data sharing and the value proposition around the BodyPass solution. Yeah, I would like to introduce myself. I am Ivan Martinez from Atos Research and Innovation Department, and I have contributed to the several research projects related with mainly with big data and the blockchain technologies, such as Toreador and BodyPass, for instance. I'm currently involved in iFreeMarket, leading in the latest definition and integration of the system architecture, playing the role of technical coordinator in this project, and in concrete in DataVault, leading the specification and provision of the secure data analytics playground. Jumping now to the BodyPass ambition. Well, we could say that the BodyPass ambition was the creation of a platform to exchange 3D data between different partners from different sectors, as healthcare and consumer goods, breaking barriers between both sectors and eliminating the current data silos. And to reach this goal, BodyPass is supported by blockchain technologies. Has let me say has the main pillar. Once introduced the BodyPass ambition, I would like to put all of you in context, trying to answer some challenges behind the BodyPass solutions. So we could say that one of the main establishing blocks for digital transformation is always the difficulty to access external data asset in a secure and trustable manner. There is a clear need for platforms that offer not only control to the data set, but also means query different data based on a variety of criteria in a distributed fashion. In addition, platforms should allow a combination of query results while preserving security and traceability of the interaction, thereby creating let me say a trustworthy environment for interaction of different stakeholders in data ecosystem. The BodyPass solution answer all these challenges following an innovative approach based on blockchain. Has key technology has already commented in the previous slide. Regarding to the BodyPass service offering, we could say that the BodyPass solution provides the following service offering. Yeah, first of all, the BodyPass solution provides a blockchain-based data sharing private network. Secondly, means for data providers to expose the data has external relational databases or external APIs in a secure and let me say privacy preserving way, and is enabling distributed querying of those data to members of a private blockchain network. Thirdly, the BodyPass solution provides a smart contract to enable trust transactions among stakeholders in the network. In addition to this, the body pass solution provides an off-chain management of big data set to avoid the issues of managing large files in a blockchain that slow down the overall performance. The main innovation is that the platform allow off-chain managing of big files, meaning that the metadata resides on the blockchain while the actual data is contained in files managed outside the blockchain. The body pass solutions provides anonymization of data based mainly on anonymization of the body scans, as for instance, applying array faces or block features, and on the provision of the method used to avoid re-identification of a scan individual has, for instance, limit queries to or try to return different results each time. And finally, the body pass solution is supporting distributed queries to external databases for searching data, in addition to distributed queries to external APIs. User of the network will able to run queries, while data provider will retain the ability to approve or deny access, managed by a specific smart contract and traceable via auditable logs and immutable distributed layer. Okay, let me move now to the body pass conceptual approach. Speaking now about the conceptual approach behind body pass, as you could see in the central part of the slide, in the dark orange part, we have several data sets coming from the health and consumer goods sector, and the goal is to foster exchange, linking, and reuse, as well as to integrate all these 3D data set. To do this, body pass has to adapt and create tools that allow a secure exchange of information between data owners, companies, and subjects that are mainly patients and customers in the case of body pass. The solution proposed is based on the provision of a data exchange network, place it on the light orange part at the bottom of the picture, and supported by blockchain technology. Finally, once the data have been shared, taking advantage of the body pass blockchain network, several mechanisms to mainly advance query data, including federated queries, are provided as part of the body pass solution. Finally, regarding to the real value of the data in the body pass context, we could say that here the 3D personal data is the type of data that contains useful information for product designs, online sales services, medical research, or patient follow-up, among others. Trying to answer now the question why blockchain technology in the body pass project. We could first of all looking at the benefits of the blockchain that are mainly these three that you could see in the slide. The first one will be that you get a history of activity, not just a snapshot in time. The second is related with there is no one central point of attack. And finally, there is no centralized controlling in blockchain. And regarding when might we use blockchain, here we have always four for a scenario. The first one could be when you want to manage and secure a digital relationship or keep a centralized shared system of record. The second scenario is when you want to record secure transaction, especially between multiple partners. In the third scenario is where the data is, let me say, in a constant flux, but you want to keep record of past action. And finally, in the fourth scenario will be anywhere a middleman or gatekeeper function is expensive or time consuming. Okay, speaking about the concrete technical approach behind BodyPass, we could say that the BodyPass platform is built considering two data planes: the data sharing plane, which control and track the access to the data, and the data management plane, which manage the access to the variety of physical sources of data. And from the external actors' point of view, there are three different profiles that interact with in the BodyPass ecosystem, considering the relationship with the data, and which are the data providers, data processors, and finally the data consumers. Jumping now to the BodyPass value proposition, the BodyPass solution can be included in your company offering. Let me say where there is a need for data gathering from different stakeholders in a secure and privacy-preserving manner. The solution, the BodyPass solution, adds auditability and immutability of the transaction, thanks to use a distributed ledger, contributing in this way to increase trust among network participants. Regarding the potential use cases, we could say that data sharing through the use of distributed queries is applicable to different sectors or industries. Example of these are in health and in retail sectors, but can be, let me say, use it potentially in other sectors. Here it is important to highlight that it is especially easy to implement when the provider exposes their data in the form of SQL databases. Regarding to the new opportunities, we could say that BodyPass offers tools that open new opportunities for solving business and societal challenges. BodyPass will help to the European consumer goods industries to improve product designs, to enable mass customization and increase on online services, and will help to stakeholders of image diagnostics market for accessing 3D data to enable a new diagnosis services and improve the patient journey in the health sector. To improve in diagnosis will be enable easier patient follow-up and will reduce costs in the health sector. I would like to conclude this short presentation highlighting firstly that BodyPass provides a trust data sharing platform based on blockchain approach, has key technology. Secondly, the BodyPass solution includes an off-chain data management layer supporting orchestration of federated queries in addition to the data querying and processing services. Thirdly, BodyPass is an extensible solution for new data providers. The new data providers could join BodyPass network simply by publishing their data services in the public data service catalog managed by the data sharing plane. And finally, we could say that the data has a service, and insight has a service have been raised in BodyPass has ways to achieve future data monetization. Yeah, and that's all from my side. Yuri, back to you.
Thank you, Ivan. So this was our last presentation in this session. So now two experts join us, and first I will ask them to introduce themselves. So these are Marina Dabalmida and George Priester. I would please introduce shortly yourself and maybe say a few words regarding the session. Maybe there is a certain topic which you would like to discuss, or maybe you have a certain feedback to what you just heard during the session. And after that, we will come to the questions from the audience. We collected some, and by way to audience, you have a possibility to vote for the questions. So now we see already what some questions are of interest for several people. So we will give them a priority in the left time. So Marina, you are first.
Okay, good morning and thank you for the invitation. I am Marina Dabalmida. I am a lawyer specialized in new technological development with a PhD legal issues of new technologies. I am also serving as ethics expert for European Commission and in several European projects, and have scientific collaboration in place with research institutions like NIC and CNR, and collaborate in the research and innovation division of multinational companies on these topics. The session today was really interesting, and one important topic is mentioned today is the regulatory reform which are under development, and I think they are really key in order to allow our the development embedding European values in the new decade, in line with the digital compass vision. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Marina. Giorgio?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to this interesting session. Let me say, I would like to, first of all, I'm leading Major Cities of Europe, which is an organization, non-profit, for which gathers cities from around Europe, CIOs and smart city managers and so on. What I would like to say in a few words, maybe after Marina will say something afterwards, is that I am wondering about one thing. Okay, I'm a citizen. I want to make sure that my data are used properly. Fine. Second, I'm a citizen, but I want to have services for my city. And here comes the difficult question, because I would like to talk about the only example I know where citizens, by being part of a network where they share a lot of personal data, they get a lot of interesting services. So I don't know how you want to lead this discussion, Yuri, but if you want, I can say it now. You say yes. Okay, so I will say it. Now, I know many cities that have created data lakes with a lot of information. They're using it to develop new services, which are really cities design services, not citizen design services. And so the question is, if I am a citizen, why should I allow the city to use my personal data if it is used for general purpose? I am interested in what I get from the city, not generally speaking what's about traffic or things like that, that in any case don't need personal profiling. They need anonymized data. Now, the only example I know where this paradigm has been completely changed, and you are following me differently from what I said at the beginning. I plan to show in 2 minutes some pictures of what I mean. So the city itself is the city of Tel Aviv, which is not in Europe, by the way. The project that they have developed and is fully operational is called Digital. They started in 2013. And I show you what they do by profiling the citizens. So I do some sharing here. Let me see if I'm allowed to do that. Yes, this is the one. Can you see it?
Yes.
So few charts very, very quickly. Don't worry, there is no word in it. So let me put it on full screen if I can. Otherwise, I go down. Okay, let's go this way. Okay, so what they do with personalization, the project is much bigger than that, but it's what I want to focus is personal data. So first of all, it's about creating a sort of club called Digital Club, which provides e-services, benefit, and personal information. And let me give you some information, some details about it. First of all, how many citizens are registered to this service. These are the figures from after 6 years of beginning of the service, 2018. The city has less than 500,000 inhabitants. So this means that not considering the younger people and babies and some people that don't want to register, this is about a big part of the population which is registered to the service. And it is registered with personal data. So if I am a father or a mother having children, and I'm interested in being invited in session of socialization and experiences among us, I need to put my data in the system so that I'm invited when there are such meetings, and I am able to share whatever I want with friends and with people I meet that have also young children or babies. And if I want to learn on how to be a father or a mother, I might want to be invited to workshops. And then there is entertainment, having tours or fashion or about fashion for babies, or about using museums and about going to the beach. And then this is different. I want to have a reduced price and so on. And I can continue. If I want to go to the theater, maybe today there are some left seats at the theater, and I will be invited if I want to buy the tickets at a reduced price and so on. What I mean is that by giving to the city in a trusted way, so it is not, it must be voluntarily and should be accepted, of course. I get really a big service from the city, which is really profiled and customized to me. Now, the question is, would DataVaults is providing the platform that could allow that in a trusted way? How would, what it means is that the city has a very active role in promoting these services. Otherwise, it won't happen. I mean, if these are the standard services of the city, it's okay. But I doubt that many citizens would apply to that if they don't get really some personal feedback out of it. So this is my key message I wanted to give. Of course, I'm ready to discuss other ones.
Thank you, Giorgio. So indeed, of course, very important to what citizens or individuals, we understand what we get from their data, and on our hand, what we understand how their data are used and what they keep control over the data. So in this particular case, for example, for me, it's not very clear if we have such a control and how data is really used after that, and if we really can track that.
The answer is yes, of course, but I cannot explain now. Okay. You're right. Nobody would give data without it. Now, the question is how a city can be organized, assuming that the data are trusted and the data are managed by myself. How can a city organize such a service? Because it doesn't come for free. I mean, you need organization, staff, ideas, etc., etc.
Okay. I agree. So my short answer, in particular DataVaults, it's a technical project, so technological projects. So we are a kind of intermediary between the service providers and the data providers. So we are developing technology to be used by the cities. And so we are part of an ecosystem, basically, and this ecosystem needs to be built. Yeah, so this short answer. So thank you, Giorgio. I would like, because we are over time already, I propose, first of all, to people which questions we will not manage to answer now, we still can write them in VOBA, and we will reply to them later, so online. And we have just 5 minutes left, and maybe we can answer the most popular questions from the list. And I think the most popular question at the moment, it's about DGA. Do you think that DGA intermediaries chapter will succeed in creating an environment of innovation? It seems to me to burden some without real incentives. And Malte already activated the camera, so definitely the right person to answer this question. Thank you, Malte.
Yeah, yes, thanks a lot. Thanks for all the interesting presentations, and thank you for the question. Indeed, I mean, the question has been asked to us as well, is that basically what's the carrots here and what's the sticks? I think the carrot is still that money can be made in the future, and a lot of companies will want to outsource their data holding problem to a data vault generally. So they want to not to receive all that data in the future. They want to be able to rely on a data library of you and for you to keep your data safe, and maybe pay a fee for that. I mean, that's what brings the incentive. We also worked on the administrative burden. I think with the notification regime, it's something you can do really in 1 hour to put all your file together and submit it to the agency. So there's not a much of a burden, but indeed on the substance, there is a certain burden in terms of what you can do. And that's, well, now where you have probably to measure any small startup also against the larger companies that could enter the space very easily. And that's the reason why we're quite strict on the neutrality environment. But then again, in the My Data community, you have tons of startups that actually like the proposal as it is. So we were not worried about this. Now, is there an incentive advice for you to fill your data vault as an individual? That could be a problem, but that's also why we're working on making data portability much easier. And the data vault services or the data space service should indeed also offer a portability service so that you execute it with a click of a button almost. And when there's an API in place on the source side, so where your data are currently held, that could actually work also quite quickly. So we've seen demonstrations where just for the most popular data sources, it's a relatively easy effort. It's not too complicated, but then indeed we need to, I mean, data portability needs to work in real time and through APIs with many, many more data sources. And that's, I think, where most of the data vault services also spend their time on to get to onboard, so to say, or to actually make data sources onboardable. On the second question, if I just may, I see the question on altruism.
Yes.
So it's not meant primarily to share with your government. It could be anyone. It will be mostly research, we believe. On the Data Act, I can't say much at this stage. We have the report of an expert group on business to government data sharing, as we call it. There are some recommendations for maybe a cross-cutting enabling framework for a more on-demand access to private sector databases, but that will not be then in a relationship between governments and individuals. It will be rather between governments and corporate players. That being said, also having heard to Giorgio, I mean, in the city context, you may have this direct interaction between government and also citizens, and that's what also under the so-called self-data territorial project is experimented with in French cities, but also I think in the city of Helsinki. So there are a couple of cities who explore a bit to directly engage with citizens and basically say, be a good citizens and also help us to improve public services and give us data points that may help us to do so. I'm running through the questions. On question 4, on the mapping of infrastructures, I'm not sure exactly what's behind, so I'll just skip it. And maybe the final remark on this, I think it's not about beating the powers of the Googles and Facebooks. I mean, Facebook is also a data generator. Without Facebook, certain data would just not exist because you had no means to basically share your social status. And so we will need always also bigger and smaller giants to actually first generate information about you. Don't underestimate that role. And then it's more in the data vaults for us, it's more a question of the reuse of this existing data for other purposes. And I think that's very, very important. Let's not mix the two roles here. Okay, I spoke as quickly as I could. I hope I got the message through. Thank you. Back to you, Yuri.
Thank you, Malte. Actually, I
have
would
to
like
leave you also now because of the upcoming meeting at sharp.
Oh.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. I also would like to comment that question about Google. So my personal opinion, I agree with Malte for, let's say, for now, but I believe at some point the government will need to take care about this monopolistic position of some companies on the market, similar like it has been done already for the energy market and gas market and other markets, and maybe the government at the end will need to make a legislation actually asking a big company to split the data from services. So in a sense, what the server, the data should be managed by basically different companies when service providers. And that would open the market for different data management platforms and would enable also citizens to maybe to increase the chances of taking the control of the data. But this is for far future, probably. I cannot imagine it now. So we are out of time, but maybe we can pick one more question. One question was directed to me. How basically DataVaults relate to my data project? So of course we know about my data initiative. We are not a member, and also I think none of the members of DataVaults is a member of my data. But we are following them, we have direct contact to them, and at the later stage of our project, I think we will do more together. So we will see. But we are, of course, know them. One question, has anyone seen Scotland's work in citizen access, participation, personalization, and empowerment? And what is the link? So I recommend also participants check the link. So personally, I don't know. Maybe someone knows Scotland's work. Mentioned one? No. Okay. So so we don't know. So but we will have a look. Thank you for providing a link. Did we forget any questions? No, I think we are done. So thank you very much for attending this session. Many thanks to contributors and speakers. We hope to see you at our next workshop, and many thanks to BDVA for hosting and organizing this event. It's always a pleasure to work with BDVA. Thank you. Have a nice day and stay safe, and don't forget to join the next sessions.